The history of modern statewide law enforcement in South Carolina can be tracked back to the state's Constitution, adopted on April 16, 1868. Act 11 established a state constabulary police with chief constable, deputy chief, and deputy constables serving in the counties. The act mandated them to obey and execute the orders of the governor in relation to the preservation of the public peace and the execution of the laws throughout the state. They were also instructed to repress disorder and prevent crime with the same authority given to local police or watchmen. With the passage of the Dispensary Act of 1892, the state took control of the sale and distribution of alcoholic beverages. Governor Benjamin Tillman ordered the constabulary to enforce the new dispensary law and stop unregulated sales of alcohol. The law was unpopular, as were the constables who investigated the liquor violations. Called Tillman spies, the constables received little support from the public, newspapers, and local police. The Dispensary Act was repealed in 1907. And counties decided if they would allow liquor sales or be dry. The constabulary continued to operate, primarily enforcing state liquor laws. In 1915, the legislature prohibited the sale of alcohol and expanded the constable's authority beyond that of liquor enforcement. Over time, their authority included the detection of crime. At the time, Governor Blackwood said, "More emphasis will be laid upon the arrest of murderers, firebugs, bandits, and major criminals than upon the jailing of rum runners." On May 14, 1935, the General Assembly created the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division to enforce the state liquor law, assist any law enforcement officer in the detection of crime, along with the enforcement of the state's criminal laws. Funding was provided for 21 new officers to the existing 3 members of the state constabulary. Governor Olin D. Johnston appointed J. Henry Jeans as chief. In a 1947 effort to establish a state bureau of investigation, the newly elected Governor Strom Thurmond transferred the Identification Bureau and fingerprint records out of the Highway Patrol and placed those functions into the newly named State Law Enforcement Division. SLED'S 45 officers were renamed as agents. Joel Townsend was appointed by Governor Thurmond as chief, and the SLED headquarters were moved from downtown to its current location on Broad River Road in Columbia. Townsend was succeeded by Orrin L. Brady as chief in 1949 and served until 1956, when he returned to Spartanburg County as a resident SLED agent until his death in 1967. In 1951, Governor James F. Burns raised the minimum standards for agents, requiring more professional and scientific backgrounds and education. J.P. Pete Strom, who had served since 1947, was appointed SLED chief in July of 1956. He immediately started innovative changes, including training, technology, and forensics. Chief Strom bought SLED'S first bloodhounds with his own money. Known for his fairness, Chief Strom's credo, which continues today, states, "Make sure a person is guilty before you affect his reputation, his freedom, or his pocketbook. Make sure that you always assure yourself that you are the fairest juror a suspect will ever have. Remember, you do not make the facts, you discover and report them." In January 1963, Chief Strom personally escorted Harvey Gantt as Gantt entered Clemson College as the school's first African-American student. Clemson's historic desegregation passed without incident. During the 1960s and 1970s, Chief Strom worked to ease racial tensions and violence seen in other states during the Civil Rights Movement and desegregation. He opened and maintained a dialogue with leaders in the black communities to reduce tension and prevent violence, winning their respect as a result of his commitment. Prior to the tragic 1968 shooting deaths of 3 students at South Carolina State College in Orangeburg, Chief Strom had met with community leaders and planned a peaceful protest march and arrest process, knowing that the best way to resolve the segregation issue was not through violence, but to get cases before the courts. During his 31-year tenure as chief, Strom was instrumental in establishing statewide police training and standards, funding the state's criminal justice training effort out of SLED'S existing budget and facilities. Chief Strom's vision of a centralized law enforcement training institute was realized in 1968 when the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy was founded. The legislature and Governor Robert E. McNair honored Chief Strom's tireless efforts by dedicating the Academy's main structure as the J.P. Strom Building. Chief Strom died December 14, 1987, but his legacy of fairness, honesty, and professionalism continues today. SLED maintains close relationships with our law enforcement partners, the branches of our state government, and the public we all serve. Robert M. Stewart was appointed chief in January 1988 by Governor Carroll Campbell. Stewart joined SLED in 1975 and was promoted to assistant chief in 1987. Under Chief Stewart's leadership in 1994, SLED received national accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. SLED'S Forensic Laboratory received national accreditation from the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board. Other innovations included new technologies in fingerprint identification, DNA analysis, and identifying and tracking sex offenders. Construction resulted in new buildings for the Forensic Laboratory, Tactical Operations, and Helicopter Hangar. Following the attacks of September 11, 2001, Chief Stewart served as the state's Homeland Security Director, coordinating SLED'S new role as the lead agency in the state's counterterrorism efforts. Chief Stewart often said, "I consider it to be a calling to be a law enforcement officer, but it's a sacred mission to be a SLED agent." Chief Stewart retired from SLED in 2007. Governor Mark Sanford then appointed Reginald Reggie Lloyd as director of SLED. Lloyd previously served as a circuit court judge and U.S. Attorney for South Carolina. He served as director until June 2011, at which time Governor Nikki Haley appointed Mark Keel as chief. Keel had joined SLED in 1979 and was chief of staff in 2008 when Chief Stewart retired. He was appointed director of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety before returning to SLED as chief in 2011. Under Chief Keel's leadership, SLED regained CALIA accreditation in 2013, and the Forensic Laboratory was reaccredited with ASCLD Lab International to international standards in 2014.
Everybody in South Carolina deserves equal level of law enforcement service. It doesn't matter if you're from a small town, every citizen in this state deserves equal level of law enforcement service. And that's what SLED's about. SLED's about seeing that no matter where you live, no matter where you're from here in South Carolina, that if a crime happens in your community, we're going to be there to see that justice is served.
Continually seeking to be the state's premier law enforcement agency, SLED's mission continues to be focused on providing quality personnel and technical assistance to South Carolina's law enforcement agencies and to conduct professional investigations on behalf of the state to solve crime and promote public order in our state.